Welcome to the Rankings Podcast, where we feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and elite personal injury attorneys and share their inspiring stories. Now, let's get started with the show.
Chris Stryer here, president and founder of Rankings.io, where we help elite personal injury attorneys dominate first page rankings. You're listening to the Rankings Podcast, where I feature top business owners, entrepreneurs, and of course, elite personal injury attorneys. Speaking of top business owners, my guest today is Michael Mogill. Michael is not only the author of the best-selling book, The Game-Changing Attorney, but also the founder and CEO of CrispVideo Group, a legal media company that produces high-quality and engaging videos, social media marketing, and coaching for law firms nationwide. Crisp has made the Inc. 5000 list for fastest growing companies for 3 years, and I'm quite confident they'll make it for a fourth. Michael is also the organizer of the Crisp Game Changer Summit, the largest law firm growth conference in the U.S., if not the world. Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Michael, so let's jump right into the videos. So let's talk about your brand videos. So they are some of the highest quality videos in the legal space. You know, how are your videos different from the norm?
Yeah, so I think if someone has not seen one of the videos, I think the first thing that comes to mind when you mention legal video is when someone sees like a legal ad of somebody on like a TV commercial, somebody standing on top of a semi truck and screaming. Traditionally, they're very like they could be a bit outlandish at times, or it's one of those like mesothelioma type commercials where it's all text. It's like if you've been injured, you know, whatever that might be. And our videos, the best way I could describe it would be almost like movie trailers. So all of our content is heavily story focused. So we're always looking to connect emotionally, to engage people, also to build authenticity and trust around our attorneys. Like, so traditionally, there's not that much trust in the legal space, or from consumers towards attorneys. And much of that has probably been perpetuated by a lot of bad actors. So to that extent, we like to really give our attorneys a clear differentiator. And one of the ways to do that is like, not only are the videos high quality, but I don't know that that's the biggest factor. I think more than anything, it drives emotion, and emotion drives action.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, consumers like to do business with who they know, like, and trust. And if you see that individual and it takes them down to that emotional level of that experience, then yeah, it just separates you entirely. A lot of people get these videos made and then they kind of just set on the shelf. They'll put them on their about page, or maybe they'll just upload it to YouTube. So, after they get these amazing videos produced, what are some of the best practices to really get the most out of them?
Yeah. So I mean, there's obviously a lot of ways in which you can get the most out of your videos. I take it that, when law firm owners are investing in any marketing, particularly, let's say video, it's not just to have a nice video to play at cocktail parties. It's really with the goal of, we want to drive new business. We want to attract more discerning clients and better clients in cases, those types of things. So it really comes down to, on the simplest way of putting it is getting your content out to the people, like your ideal clients, and where they spend their time. So of course, your website, without a doubt, if that's home base, then you probably want to put the video up on the site, but then also considering other platforms like YouTube and Facebook and social media. We have many clients that run our videos as TV commercials. We'll do shorter cuts, and that still works well too. But I think the way to get the most reach right now with video, to be able to reach the most people for the lowest cost, is probably by far social media. I mean, when you think about how we're consuming content and the amount of videos that you're now watching on a Facebook feed, or even on YouTube, or even LinkedIn and Instagram, it's tremendous. And the fact of the matter is, like, the cost of that is, compared to other things that you can do, like compared to a TV commercial, for example, your cost to get 1,000 people to see your video on a platform like Facebook is still like tiny. I mean, we're talking like 1 cent per view. So that's always been something that we've pushed heavily, because so much of like video is also in terms of like remaining top of mind and building a brand and getting people to remember you. A lot of attorney marketing, if let's say you're a personal injury lawyer, most of the time that people see your content, they don't need you yet. They haven't been injured yet. There's just not that need. So you have to consider that you're not that necessarily relevant to them at that point. Now, the day that they are injured, you're extremely relevant. But there's a very, very, very small percentage of people that need you on any given day. Like, meaning that, like, if you're looking at like Google pay-per-click, someone's typing in a specific keyword, they're looking for an injury attorney. That person needs that lawyer today. However, there's also a much larger base of people, millions and millions, like 97%, that are consuming content and will need an attorney at a point in their life, whether it's, next week or next year or 5 years from now. And if they remember you, when they're in that accident, they're generally going to call the person they remember.
Yeah, totally. And, you've heard the saying that 50% of your marketing is working. You just don't know which half. And, it's frustrating because a lot of businesses only look at the bottom of the funnel and they try to relate something to just a specific action and in cost per acquisition. So, what I'm hearing is like investing in the brand. Would you say that's kind of fair?
So we could do an entire podcast on this topic because this is something that I'm especially passionate about. I mean, literally, you look at our business and how we grew, and we grew over 1,000% in the last 3 years. And you're like, well, how did you guys do that? And so much of that was once we started heavily investing in the brand, like brand drivers, like the book, the conference, the ambassador programs, all these different things, the amount we were investing on social. And those are things that in the short term, we didn't really see a huge response from. It wasn't like we launched an ad and then we started getting phone calls or leads or anything like that. But over the long term, built up so much credibility, so much trust. That was like the most impactful stuff we could have done. And the reason why brand is so important is for a lot of short-term drivers, and I do believe those are important too. I'm not saying don't do the stuff that is direct response or gets the phone to ring today. It's just that if you are heavily reliant on that, and that's the only thing that you are doing, what happens when the PPC costs continue to rise as they are, and the cost of acquisition becomes too high? Like it doesn't make sense anymore. At that point, let's say you shut them off, you vanish from the face of the internet. Like if that's the only way that people are finding you. And because of that, when you build a brand, you build a lot of brand equity. Like that's how you build that brand trust. That's how you build that credibility. I do believe that like law firms have a brand, whether they like it or not. It's either by default or by design. Right. So like the brand, there's something there. It may not be a positive association, but there is some sort of association. And if you can design that and make sure that it's being conveyed in the right way, and you do remain top of mind. I mean, look at I'll give you another example. When you look at the most dominant firms across the entire nation, you look at the market leaders in every single market, those firms also have the strongest brands. Like it's not just coincidence. Also, when you look at this stuff, it's like the ones that have been heavily brand focused and building that brand trust. Now, it used to be really expensive. You have to do like tons of TV and billboards and radio. So that kept a lot of people, unless you were the top market leader, even getting into those mediums was very, very expensive. They were already heavily saturated. But now when you've got the internet and social, now you can see like small and mid-sized firms build much larger brands over time because they're putting out great content, great marketing. They're getting it in front of the right audiences. I mean, I really do think that is the single biggest factor in attracting the best clients and cases. Like we're talking about not just like, I want a lot of auto accident cases. It's you want trucking cases, you got to become the trucking lawyer, right? And the only way that you do that is to brand yourself as such and be remembered as such. So this is one of those things that if people have one takeaway from all of this is that investing heavily in the brand, doing the things when you're playing the long game are reaping the highest rewards and are ultimately driving the highest returns for the fastest growing firms that we work with. I mean, I'm telling you, just plainly, that does not mean they have to do anything with us. They can do it themselves. They can hire another company. Like I'm okay, but in working with 1,000 law firms in every market of every practice area, big and small, like we see clear trends. Like success leaves clues, and the ones that are heavily investing in their brand and in their brand marketing are the ones that are getting the best clients, getting the best cases, have the greatest credibility, have the greatest trust. When you're the best kept secret, people can't hire you.
Right. I love that. I mean, you're talking about building an asset. And, I've heard you speak at the Game Changer Summit. You talked about, attention and awareness. And, that's how people find you. That's how they know you. That's how they like you. That's how they trust you. And Gary Vee was talking about traffic arbitrage and, talking about Facebook, talking about LinkedIn and multi-channel approach. But, it's all essentially building the brand, but when you look at your social stack service, getting granular, getting to the numbers, what do you see, driving the most awareness for the lowest cost? It is traffic arbitrage.
Yeah, so there's a couple things, and just to give people who are listening clarity, a social stack. So we offer like a multi-channel social marketing campaign where we like basically distribute the content that we create for a law firm on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and just hit them at a almost like an unreasonable frequency where your audience is seeing your content nonstop. I guess the biggest drivers that we see, I mean, if you look at probably the best platforms, out of all the platforms, Facebook's still the best. I think Facebook's still the best for video. YouTube, there's certain versions, like there's like 6-second YouTube bumper ads, the videos that play before a video starts, almost like the ad, that's unskippable. So those are so low cost that you can get a very high frequency on them right now. Now that said, it's unlikely that someone's going to be, wanting to watch the new Fast and the Furious trailer. And I just heard today that movie got, postponed a year. So that's a shame. But let's say they're about to watch that. They see a 6-second ad for your law firm. It's unlikely they're going to stop everything, call you, book a consult, become a client, and you've got, traumatic brain injury case. It's possible, but probably unlikely. Now, you say that and you say, okay, well, why would I do 6-second YouTube bumper ads? Well, because you can display your content 100,000 times every hour, and they don't have to convert on the YouTube ad. One of the biggest things we see is that you actually see very, very few conversions directly from social media. So from Facebook or from YouTube or from whatever, like somebody sees your ad, clicks your ad, becomes a client, but then we see a high uplift in branded search. So meaning that they saw this stuff, but then they Googled your firm name and then they knew to reach out to you. But then, if you're like looking at this and you're tracking, you're like, well, how do they hear about us? You're going to, in your attribution, whether your intake staff is doing it, whether you use intake software, it'll probably say Google search, but they had to find out about your law firm somewhere, right? So.
Yeah. And I know a lot of SEO agencies that take advantage of that, right? The attribution component, but the craziest thing that I keep hearing over and over is this brand building. You talked about, I was going to ask you about your CrispX, your coaching program, where it's got, these elite attorneys in them and how they're different. But I think you answered that, a lot of that about the brand. But I kind of wanted to go a little bit different. Having this mindset and trying to drive a ton of attention is one thing, but specifically, how are you setting these BHAG type goals, these big, hairy, audacious goals? What's the process that you go through that maybe an attorney listening could get something out of that process?
Yeah. So when it comes to goal setting, to give people context on this, that we become known for either being, it's probably a mix between insane and I don't know, maybe there's some sort of like brilliance in that, but like we're setting these huge targets, year over year. And it's like 200% year over year for the last 8 years. And when you start to double bigger numbers, those become monumental goals. Like to host a 1,000-person legal conference, that's a big goal. But what, I guess my process with that is always in the sense that if it doesn't change your life, then why would you do it? Meaning that if you set an incremental goal, let's say it's 5 or 10% growth, well, if that's not exciting enough to you, meaning that nothing changes, you just do a little better, then what would be the reason behind simply doing it? Like, I actually think you're more likely to achieve a big goal that is life-changing and transformational than a small goal that makes no impact, because you're simply not excited about it. So I do think you have to be excited about your goals, and they have to be purposeful. So it's not just like, let's pick a big number for the sake of it. It's something where you look at, well, what kind of impact can we make? And not just in our communities and with our clients, but what about for our teams, for our families, for ourselves? That to me is really exciting. And then it's really looking at it from the standpoint that if you already know how to get there, like if you set a goal and you can in your mind figure out already how to get there, it's not a big enough goal. Like this goal should have unknowns, like meaning that you set a target and you're like, I have no idea how we're going to do it. Like you're going to have to innovate in some way. You're going to have to figure things out. It can't simply be, we're just going to work harder. That would be like a 5% goal. And I also think that if you already know how to get there at the time of setting your goal, that's really a task. I don't know if that's a goal. So
Right.
That's generally my thought process. But what I can say is, like, oftentimes when we start these things, we generally have no idea how we're going to achieve a goal like that. In the case of the conference, we'd never hosted an event before. And it was really one of those things where we like picked a date and started selling tickets. And at that point, all these things have to come together. Like we hired an events manager and logistics manager because we didn't know anything about event logistics, but this person had a tremendous amount of experience that could really support us there. Also in creating the content and actually marketing the event, those types of things cause you to almost increase your capabilities and problem solve and innovate and grow, that by the time you get there and you actually pull it off, the benefit of all this is you gain the confidence to set bigger goals. But if you rob yourself of that type of opportunity simply by saying, well, I don't know how to get there yet. Well, it's never, I found with large goals, there's never a right time for them. And generally there's always going to be some sort of information or capability that you don't have at the time of setting that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if you set a big goal and even if you miss, if the goal is this monumental, that could still be a big win, right? Nobody wants to miss goals, but, so that's an accomplishment of itself. As you grow, I keep hearing over and over from many of these attorneys that I interview that one of the biggest challenges is HR. Right? You got to find the right people, right seats. What are some of the elements that you guys do to continue to grow? And I know that HR is a big challenge. What are some tips that you could provide our listeners through there?
Yeah, so there's a great book out there. I think this has probably been one of the best things that we ever did and we ever learned as a company. The book is called No Ego by Cy Wakeman. She is somebody who's not only a leadership expert, but is also an expert in workplace drama, because there's a lot of, so the challenge around HR is that there's a lot of, I don't know if the word is like flawed, but perhaps just there's a lot of studies out there that are based on like workplace happiness and like workplace engagement. And unfortunately, a lot of those studies are based on interviewing people and employees at organizations based on what would make you happy if that was in place. But it's not actually based upon like what did make them happy. It's what they believed would make them happy. So it's like a flawed study, right? You really have to look at like the actual outcomes versus looking at what someone would say would bring them happiness and enjoyment. Because I found that you generally cannot buy someone's love. HR and people are very complicated just in nature, but it really comes down to, I think the biggest factor, it comes down to just the standards that you set. So meaning that like, this goes like both ways. If you see something in your organization that's below standard and do nothing, that becomes the new standard. And if you see anything that's off culture and do nothing, well, then that becomes the new culture. So I feel like as leaders, oftentimes, if there's a cultural issue or a team issue, it's because we've enabled it. So like meaning that has become acceptable in the organization. So meaning like, well, why are all my people showing up late? Well, maybe there's no downside to them showing up late. They can still exist there, month over month, year over year. And it's making those tough decisions and having those difficult conversations. The other thing is just having clear alignment. The biggest thing that I realized years ago with culture was that, many organizations are trying to get best places to work, and we got it, but what I found was, there was a year we got best places to work. But what I realized over time was that, if you are trying to be the best place to work for all of America, well, you're going to be a very mediocre company. You're going to be probably a very low output, mediocre organization. However, if you're instead focusing on being the best place to work for high accountable people that align with your values, that essentially are a good fit for your work style, how you guys do things. Let's say you're at the top of your game in world class. It takes workaholics that don't see their families for weeks at a time. But if you attract people like that, it's going to be the best place to work for them. It may not be for somebody else, but that's how you can ensure value alignment. So we're not necessarily here to change people or to change someone's, lifelong values, but it's ensuring that the people that we're hiring align with our organizational values for it to be the best place to work for them.
Yeah, I love that. And even, your company changes so much too. So, you couldn't put a catcher in center field, right? So they may be the right person at one point in time, but they may not be in the future. So, one of the challenges that we've had personally, I know other attorneys face too, is forecasting though, right? Because it can be a big cost, right? If you overhire, are there any leading indicators or anything that you're looking at to try to gauge that growth?
So this has been it's a good question you ask it. I would say that how I've approached it now is that, the right person, that A player, that all-star, that, that person you would find, I don't think you can ever overpay for them, because there's never, like, if you look back at your best team members ever in the history of your organization and you look at the absolute best one, would you ever feel that you would ever overpay for that person? Probably not. So they're worth it, number one. But two, when they're like that good, it's always, in my experience, has been worth it bringing them on board, because you can always find what you can do and where you can place a really great person. Many businesses struggle actually on the opposite side of not being able to scale up capacity fast enough, because they're going to wait until we get more business, until we get more cases or whatever it might be. But the challenge is that when that happens, because marketing will typically outpace hiring, now you're looking for somebody. And let's say it takes you, a month or two to find them. Then you hire them, but they got to put in a 2-week notice where they were at. Then you got to train them, which takes another 2 to 3 months. So you're looking at 3 to 4 months sometimes to ramp up somebody from the time you decide to hire to the time that they actually get in place and they're operating at their capacity. So that's a very long runway. So when looking at forecasting, it's, you've got to have confidence in, when you're investing in your marketing, you have confidence in the future, essentially is what it is. Do you believe that you're going to get to where you're going? Do you believe you're going to achieve those targets? If you're doubtful from the onset, I would say solve that problem first. If you set goals that you don't think you're going to achieve, then I would argue maybe, look at your commitment, and perhaps you've set the wrong goals, right? Because would be something where you're like, we're going to do it. And you're so committed to it that you're going to invest in hiring people, investing in your marketing, investing in your infrastructure, whatever it might be. So my answer to this, coming full circle, is, you can never have, I think, having too many great people is a wonderful problem to have.
Yeah, and when you overhire too, it gives you a little extra motivation to hit that big goal.
If you build it, they will come.
Right. So you mentioned Cy, And, what are some other of your favorite business books or conferences maybe that you can recommend?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of like business books, there's like Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. I think that's a great business book. There's several. Like when you look at like Vern Harnish and Scaling Up and the Rockefeller Habits, those are excellent books as well. As I think about conferences, there's several great ones. I think Traffic and Conversion is a great conference from Digital Marketer. That's been one that we've attended in recent years. Drift has a conference called Hypergrowth. I think that's a great one too. And there's another one that's that we never get to attend because we're behind the scenes, but the Game Changer Summit, which is kind of ironic because we wanted to create the type of conference that we'd want to attend, and ironically we never get to attend it.
Yeah, and I've been to Game Changers the last 2 years. I think you knew that. And Chris Voss, I picked up his book. He's brilliant. I talked to Ted Jenkins. You've just had some amazing guests on. Let's talk about the event in November. So can we get a preview, a little, like who are some of your speakers that you've announced so far?
So the ones that we've announced so far has been Malcolm Gladwell, John Maxwell, and Cy Wakeman. So those are the ones we've announced so far. There are several big ones coming down the pipe. We've been holding off, so we'll since the event is in November, we'll be announcing them in the next few months. But our goal is to top each conference, so to make it not just having better content, better production, just a better experience. So we really want to, we challenge ourselves with like, how do we make it a better experience year over year? And I can say confidently that this year's speaker lineup is the best one of any year. And I mean that truthfully because it was probably invested twice as much into it to get the speakers that we've gotten over the years. But this one will be really special.
That's awesome, Mike. So, what other questions and stories have we not talked about? Do you think it'd be important?
It's one of those things where something that's always fascinated me has been about like, why do, like, let's say the most successful law firms in America or business owners, let's say, why are they succeeding? Whereas, some people may not be as successful, and like, what are the differentiators between that? And, not only is it their mindset. I mean, it's always mindset, right? So like, if you are thinking big, no matter where you're at, I mean, everybody has a ground zero, but it's also in the way in which they make decisions. So meaning that, are you looking at from the standpoint of, I'm going to invest in something, but how do I invest the least and make the most? I think that is a very selfish mindset. Like when I see people doing that kind of stuff, I think, okay, so you're looking at how do you give the least amount of value to get a desired outcome and a desired result so you can extract the most profit. And again, if you do that, it's all about you. It's not about your team or your clients and anything like that. Whereas if you flip that and say, well, how do we go out there and just create the most value? So like without even considering oftentimes like, well, but I want to make sure I get, every dollar, every penny out of this, right? So there's investments that we make, for example, where we decide, let's say at the conference, we're going to serve like warm lunch and breakfast, right? Like what would it be if we took away the breakfast? Like, okay, I can't quantify that. Well, let's say we get rid of the open bar that we always do on the Friday evening. We'd probably save like $250,000 at this point. But and I don't know the ROI of the open bar. I don't, but it's a good experience for our attendees. So we always look at that and say, okay, well, that's probably the right thing to do. And when you have this type of mindset from the standpoint of like, how do we invest and deliver the most value from our clients? It always comes back. Like I find like when you are investing like in your business and when you are investing in other companies and other, the vendors, in your team, it always comes back to you. But if you're one of those people that's trying to hold on to their pennies, that's saying like, look, I just want the guarantees. Like, Chris, can you just do the thing that you can guarantee will get me all the trucking cases? And those people are never successful in the long term because and it's not because you're just cheap, but it's also because you are looking at it from the standpoint that like you want to control everything and you want to be able to have guarantees around things. But is your mindset about how do I make the most money or more about how do I make the greatest impact and provide the most value? Because when it's the latter, that's when you actually do see that return. And then from my experience, that's what it's been. The biggest thing I think that stops people is just that, sometimes there's unknowns around like, well, what's my ROI going to be? But the best things require like playing the long game. So a lot of times you have to just have that confidence in not only like your team, because you're not going to invest any money if you don't have confidence in your team. Like why would you want to drive more phone calls and more business if you don't feel confident your intake team can answer the phones properly? So you got to have confidence there too. And the more confidence you have there, the more that you will invest. But it's also from the standpoint of, let's say you do make all these investments, like if you're leading with, okay, this is going to be beneficial for our clients. We're going to have a better experience at our office. When clients come in, we're going to make sure that that's world-class for them. That's what's going to drive that client experience, referrals, all those different things that are the sources of the very best clients and cases. So those things have the highest ROI, but many firms are so reluctant to do it because it's not guaranteed $1 in, $1.50 back.
I love it. Abundance mindset. Mike, you've dropped so many value bombs. We've been talking to Michael Mogill, author of The Game Changing Attorney, founder and CEO of CrispVideo Group, a legal media company. Michael, where can people go to learn more about you?
So you can get the book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble. It's called The Game Changing Attorney. We distilled all our like marketing and outside to a great degree, a lot of business knowledge in that book. So it's literally like the do-it-yourself book, Game Changing Attorney. You can visit our website, CrispVideo.com. And if you're interested in attending the Game Changer Summit in November, it's CrispSummit.com.
Mike, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Rankings Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.